Hey, what's up? It's Kareem here, and I just bought the iPhone 13 Pro Max, and I've been using it for about 10 days or so. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about the pros and cons of my own personal experience going from the 12 Pro Max to the 13 Pro Max. And hopefully by the end of this video, you'd have enough information to make your own decision whether it's worth it for you to upgrade from the 12 Pro Max to the 13 Pro Max, or maybe you should wait for the next iPhone. A little disclaimer, I also use my iPhone for work. I do videography and photography, and most of the time my iPhone is actually my second camera monitor. And with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about the pros that I noticed with the 13 Pro Max since upgrading from the 12 Pro Max. First thing I noticed as soon as I started using the 13 Pro Max, obviously, is the smaller notch. On the old 12 Pro Max, it's about 34mm notch, while on the new 13 Pro Max, it's about 26mm, which is on papers, it's not that much, but when I'm actually using the phone, I could tell that the screen has a little bit of real estate at the top, which is, I guess, pretty cool. The extra real estate on the screen is not really being utilized by the new iOS. When it comes to using both, you don't notice it that much unless you're watching a video or something like that, and then you notice that this notch on the top is a little smaller. But this is a good sign for the upcoming iPhone, because the fact that they're starting to focus on making the notch smaller means maybe the next iPhone is gonna have like a little circle cut out or something, but who knows. The second thing I noticed right away while using the 13 Pro Max is the 120 Hertz. And I could notice it right away because I do a lot of gaming, and so I can notice the difference between 60, 120, and 24. But when it comes to 120 Hertz on the new iPhone, it's pretty noticeable when scrolling or like going through pictures or anything like that, because it looks a lot smoother than the 12 Pro Max. The 120 Hertz basically makes everything buttery smooth, makes it feel a little bit faster, makes the scrolling feel a lot faster, and makes scrolling through pages feel very smooth. I've been waiting a lot for the 120 Hertz on the phone, and finally it's here, so I'm pretty happy about that. Now, one of my favorite new features on the 13 Pro Max is brightness, which it is brighter than the 12 Pro Max, but more importantly, it takes a lot longer for the display to dim while you're outdoors compared to the 12 Pro Max. I was actually having a lot of trouble with the 12 Pro Max because since I use it as a second monitor and most likely it's always outdoors, the display would dim a lot and then it basically becomes unusable. With the 13 Pro Max, I haven't really had that happen to me at all, so I'm very hyped about using this when it comes to work and using it as a second camera monitor, because it doesn't really dim, and when it does dim, it dims 20% compared to like 50 or 60% on the 12 Pro Max. So that's a huge selling point for me personally. So if you're planning to use your iPhone as a second monitor or something, highly suggest going with the 13 Pro Max just for the display. And obviously both displays are OLED, so you're not gonna really notice difference when it comes to the quality other than the 120 Hertz and the brightness. Now let's address the big elephant in the room, which is the battery life. On the 13 Pro Max, well, actually let's start with the 12 Pro Max. On the 12 Pro Max, around 4 or 5 p.m. the battery would be already at 50, 40, even sometimes 30%, depends on how hard I use the phone that day. I would be getting sometimes 25% on the 12 Pro Max around 6 p.m. or something like that. But when it comes to the new 13 Pro Max, the battery life is really good. It lasts forever. I basically just plug in my phone one time a day, which is before I go to sleep. Other than that, the battery life has been great. Compared to the 12 Pro Max, when it's at like 4 or 5 p.m., my 12 Pro Max would be at like 30%. The 13 Pro Max would be around 80, maybe even 90% sometimes. So the battery life is really improved in the 13 Pro Max, which is a great thing for me, because like I said, I do use it for work, and when I use it as a second camera monitor, usually my iPhone 12 Pro Max would be dead pretty soon, and then I would have to plug in an external battery. But for this iPhone, none of that. So that's a huge pro for me when it comes with the 13 Pro Max, is battery life. If you guys are enjoying the video so far, make sure to thumbs up and make sure to subscribe down below, ring the bell so you don't miss any future uploads. Back to the video. Now let's talk about the speakers of both phones. Usually I take my phone with me to the bathroom when I'm about to shower. With the 13 Pro Max, I usually grab the speaker because it's not actually loud enough, especially when I turn the shower on. I can't really hear anything except if I'm using the speaker. With the 13 Pro Max, all that changes, because ever since I got the 13 Pro Max, I don't really grab the speaker with me anywhere because this thing is pretty loud. Even when I turn on the shower in the bathroom, even when all the echo's going around, still the speaker is really great, and I'm glad I don't have to be grabbing the speaker with me. Oh my god, I almost dropped it. I'm glad I'm not grabbing the speaker with me everywhere I go, because my iPhone isn't loud enough. Huge pro when it comes to the 13 Pro Max. Now let's address the cameras. So when it comes to the wide angle cameras on both phones, the 12 Pro Max one, the pictures in low light situations have a lot of noise in them, especially in the shadows. I don't know why the iPhone just would try to make these area brighter, and then that would result in a lot of noise in the area. And so I really didn't like the wide angle pictures coming from the 12 Pro Max. When it comes to the 13 Pro Max, low light, wide angle shots are a lot improved. Noise is very low when it comes to the pictures, especially in low light situations. When it comes to the outdoors, both of the cameras do really good. Now when it comes to the third camera, which is the zoom camera, on the 12 Pro Max you have 2.5x zoom, while on the 13 Pro Max you have 3x zoom. It's not really that big of a difference. I don't really care that much for the zoom lens, but at least you get 0.5x more zoom on the 13 Pro Max, so it's a little bit improved. The newest addition to the cameras that I'm really happy about in the 13 Pro Max is the fact that the wide angle lens now can actually take macro shots, which is a great feature that I've actually been missing on all the previous iPhones. But now that the 13 Pro Max is here, we actually do have a macro lens, which is amazing. The 12 Pro Max, when it comes to macro, doesn't have anything to compete, obviously, because it doesn't have any macro capabilities, and so that's a huge pro for the 13 Pro Max. Now the next thing I'm going to talk about is the ProRes video, because it was a huge selling point in the Apple event. Now finally we have ProRes on the iPhone, and that basically means one thing. It means that when you're recording outside in ProRes, you get more control over your highlights and shadows, especially highlights. You get more detail in them, and so less skies being blown out and more detail in the highlights. When it comes to the 12 Pro Max, it really does a great job still in video, but it does lose a little bit of detail when it comes to the highlights, especially in very bright situations. The catch when it comes to ProRes is the file sizes are huge compared to the regular file sizes. So if you're planning to shoot a lot of ProRes video, make sure to get at least 512 gigabyte, because that would just give me 1 hour of recording ProRes. So be very careful when it comes to ProRes, because it's great, but it does come at a cost, which is storage space. If you're planning to shoot ProRes, probably want to get the 1 terabyte or 512 gigabyte version, but it is a great addition to have that option. But at the end of the day, I'd rather have that feature and not use it than not have it and need it. One thing I forgot to mention is the photographic modes when it comes to the 13 Pro Max. And basically what that means, you can assign a style to the pictures and it will just keep that style, and you can just keep taking your pictures and that style basically won't change. It is cool, but at the same time it's not really necessary at all, especially if you're planning to edit your pictures after the fact. It's cool to have. Am I going to use it? Probably. But is it very crucial and important? Probably not. So that's one thing to notice. Now let's talk about the cinematic mode in the 13 Pro Max, which you don't have nothing like in the 12 Pro Max. It's cool to have the ability to shift focus from one subject to the other, and it does give the illusion of it being really cinematic, but at the same time you don't really have control over what frames you can shoot on this mode and what resolution you can shoot on it. I wish I had more control over it. Conclusion is, it's a pretty good thing to have when it does work. Now when it comes to the speed of the phones, I mean, the 13 Pro Max is a little bit faster, and the 120 Hertz obviously does help with that to make it feel like it is a bit faster than the 12 Pro Max. But I have to say, both the phones are really smooth, both the phones are really quick. And the interesting thing is, some games would launch faster on the 12 Pro Max than the 13 Pro Max, and some games would launch faster on the 13 Pro Max than the 12 Pro Max. When it comes to the apps, it's pretty much head to head. Some apps would be a little bit faster on the 13 Pro Max, while others would be faster on the 12 Pro Max. So when it comes to the speed, I don't really notice that big of a difference, but I have to give it to the 13 Pro Max because it just feels a little bit faster than the 12 Pro Max, and the 120 Hertz does help a lot with that too. Also with the 13 Pro Max, some games can run on 120 Hertz. These games are very limited and it does drop frames sometimes, but then again, you have the ability to play on 120 Hertz on the iPhone, and that was something I never thought I would be saying. On the 12 Pro Max, you're stuck on 60 Hertz when it comes to all the apps and all the games. So again, 13 Pro Max here takes the win. Now let's talk about unlocking your phone using Face ID. Obviously both phones are really quick when it comes to Face ID, but I have to give it to the 13 Pro Max because it does feel slightly faster than the 12 Pro Max. For whatever reason, it's probably the 120 Hertz giving me that illusion. Still, I have to mention it for you guys. It does feel a little bit faster unlocking the 13 Pro Max than the 12 Pro Max. Sometimes the 12 Pro Max actually would take a minute for me to unlock. I don't know, maybe it's because I've been using it for a long time or I have a lot of apps on it or whatever, but I never had these issues with the 13 Pro Max. Also, Apple is trying a new feature which basically you can unlock your phone even if you have your mask on. It's a pretty great feature to have, so I'm really excited to try this. Just want to let you you guys know that this feature is out now on the beta software. It's coming on iPhone near you pretty soon. Get excited, even if you do have the 12 Pro Max. Now, before I start talking about the cons of using the 13 Pro Max, let's talk about the physical differences between both of them really quickly, and also the physical similarities while we're at it. Now, both phones are the same thickness and both phones are the same size. The buttons on the iPhone 13 Pro Max are slightly higher than the ones on the 12 Pro Max. The cameras on the 13 Pro Max are a lot thicker than the ones on the 12 Pro Max. When it comes to the cameras, the difference in thickness is about 2mm. On the 12 Pro Max, just the cameras are about 2.8mm thick, while on the 13 Pro Max, they're about 3.4mm thick. Now, when it comes to the front-facing speakers on both phones, you have the 12 Pro Max, the speakers just in the middle of the screen. It does make it a little bit tricky when it comes to installing screen protector or something. On the 13 Pro Max, the speaker is actually on the top of the screen, which in my opinion makes it look a lot cleaner than the 12 Pro Max, and it also makes it a lot easier installing a screen protector. Now that we're done with physical differences between both phones, let's talk about the cons. And I have to be pretty honest, it was very hard coming up with a cons list for the 13 Pro Max because my experience has just been nothing but amazing with the new iPhone, but I tried and I came up with a list of cons. So here we go. First things first, even though both phones are the same thickness and both phones are the same size, you still can't use your old cases that you bought for the 12 Pro Max for the 13 Pro Max. Just because of the fact that the buttons are a little bit higher and the cameras on the new 13 Pro Max are actually massive compared to the one in the 12 Pro Max. Get ready to say goodbye to all your favorite cases that you bought for your 12 Pro Max. Now, the next con I'm going to talk about is actually fixed by one setting that I didn't even know existed, that I just had to turn on in the setting, which is macro lens. Sometimes the macro lens would lag a little bit, or it wouldn't respond good, or it would go a little bit crazy when like I'll try to get it just on my finger or something. Apparently there's a setting that I can just turn on which gives me control over the macro lens, and as soon as I turn it on, it just stays there. Make sure if you do get the 13 Pro Max to turn on that setting so you don't have none of these issues. The next thing is the cameras and how thick they are. Obviously in the 13 Pro Max, the camera's a lot thicker than the 12 Pro Max, and so that means I have to be extra cautious with it not to damage the camera because it basically sticks out more. The next con is about the front facing camera. The fact that you pay $1,400 for the new iPhone 13 Pro Max and you don't get any upgrades or whatsoever when it comes to the front facing camera, which I do use all the time, is kind of sad. And so I wish they did something to the front facing camera. I'm not saying it's bad by any means, but we could definitely use an upgrade on the front facing camera, especially on a $1,400 phone. When it comes to the front facing cameras, both the 12 Pro Max and the 13 Pro Max are basically the same. Pretty sad if you ask me. Now, one thing I hated about the 12 Pro Max that I also hate about the 13 Pro Max is the side and the fact that it's a fingerprint magnet. Now, I fixed this problem on the 12 Pro Max with the debrand skin, but I don't think I'm gonna do that just yet for the 13 Pro Max. I wish they would try a new material or something that wouldn't be as much of a fingerprint magnet as this one is. I understand they're trying to make it look fancy and good and all. Still, I don't like the fingerprints on the side of the phone, and yeah, I don't know, maybe that's just me. Now, my next con is basically more of a personal taste than anything, because I really love the blue color on the 12 Pro Max. They basically got rid of it. I don't like the new Sierra blue that they have, and so I had to go with the white instead. But if I did have the choice, I would definitely pick up another blue phone. Now, the next and last con is basically the phone being humongous in my hand, and I did have the same problem with the 12 Pro Max. Basically, the phone is just too big to hold for longer periods of time, especially if you're just trying to use the phone with one hand. But I did find a solution for this, and that is this little magnetic MagSafe pop socket holder thingy, which in my opinion, it does work great. It provides extra grip for the phone, and it makes it a lot easier using the phone with one hand. If you do have big hands, you're probably not gonna have this issue, but I just had to mention this. Also, one thing I forgot to mention, it's not a con, it's actually a pro, is the fact that the 13 Pro Max feels very high end and it feels very fancy in the hand, and it doesn't look like a cheap phone. It doesn't feel like a cheap phone, and that's also something the 12 Pro Max had. Basically every phone before that. These phones feel solid in the hands, they feel good, they feel great, they don't feel cheap at all. So that's about it for this video. If you guys think I missed anything, let me know in the comments. Hopefully I gave you enough information so you can make your own decision whether it's worth upgrading to the 13 Pro Max if you have the 12 Pro Max or that 11 Pro Max or not. Also, let me know in the comments down below if you do have that phone and you notice something I didn't notice, or what you like about this phone, what you don't like about this phone, and let me know. Are you gonna actually upgrade from your phone to the 13 Pro Max, or you're gonna wait for the next phone? Anyway, thanks so much for watching. watching. If you guys enjoyed the video, make sure to like it. Make sure to subscribe down below because it really helps me a lot. Most of you guys are not subscribed that watch me, so subscription would be amazing. And I hope to have you here with me watching all the new upcoming videos. Thanks again for choosing my video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.